we've been talking about how alone and how unprecedented the approach that New Zealand has chosen to take in attempting to completely eliminate the virus, not just suppress or mitigate. In an economic sense, I'm wondering if you've looked at modelling or forecasting that suggests that this may enable a quicker and more robust rebound, or is there just the risk that even if New Zealand eliminates the virus, the rest of the world, for all intents and purposes, is still shut down, so the economic woes will continue?
Yes, look, thanks very much for having me. The approach we've taken from the beginning is that the best economic response to the virus is a strong public health response. The sooner that we can get it under control, the sooner the economy can come back to some sense of normality. And so we've had our Treasury here do a range of scenario planning around different lengths of time that the virus would be slowing economic activity. So we have an alert level system in New Zealand, and the most strict end of that alert level, levels 4 and level 3, and then looking also at time spent at different levels. They've also factored in the variable of what is happening in the global economy and how much that will impact. And then the third variable has been the level of stimulus and support that the government would put in. On the basis of those scenarios, it's clear to us that if we do this job once and we do it right and get on top of the virus, we run the best chance of the economy returning to some form of growth. Clearly, we are, as a small open trading nation, are dependent on the rest of the world, but there is certainly the scope for more domestic economic activity once we do this. I think the biggest danger for economies all around the world is the yo-yo effect of coming out of restrictions too early and then having to put them back on again, and the uncertainty and the disruption that will cause the economy. So we're attempting to plot a path where we keep moving steadily forward, reopening more parts of the economy, and we'll have several 100,000 more workers going back to work next week, which we hope will help us continue to get back to some sense of normality.
Could one option, which I know is being talked about a lot, is reopening trans-Tasman trade and travel?
Yeah, look, both Australia and New Zealand have done very well in terms of getting on top of the virus. We've still got work to do there, but certainly the two countries, when you look around the world, are two that have done better than most in terms of that. We're some distance off that from New Zealand's perspective. Most of the cases we have had have come in from outside, so we have strong border restrictions in place, and we expect those to stay in place for some time to come. But clearly, we would like to work towards, a time when we do reopen those borders in Australia, and us have got fairly easy flow of people in any case. So that would be something that we would like to keep working on and looking at. But in order to make sure we've really got on top of this virus, those border restrictions are going to be in place for a significant period of time.
What would that do to your tourism industry and consequently to the rest of the economy?
Well, clearly our tourism industry is going to be significantly affected. It represents somewhere between about 5 and 7% of GDP in New Zealand, and it's been a sector that's been growing strongly over the last few years. So over the next year to 18 months, it will clearly look very, very different, and we're already seeing some businesses within that sector who are either freezing their operations or scaling them down significantly. It's one of the sectors that we're very focused on working with in developing a recovery and a plan. It'll also be a plan that will involve redeployment of some people who work in those sectors, and also, support for businesses to change their focus as well. It's an example of where New Zealand will need to be looking to other sectors to pick up the slack. Our primary industries, of course, are still going very well. We're a great supplier of food to the world, and people still need that food. But we've also got to look at how we might fill the gap with other areas of work, particularly around added value processing in New Zealand and advanced manufacturing and so on that can pick up some of the slack from tourism. But there's no doubt that sector will be significantly affected for at least the next year or so.
When it comes to helping sectors of your economy, you yourself, not to mention the Prime Minister, have talked about considering all options to stimulate the economy. Will direct payments to households be included in the May 14 budget?
Look, I think the way that we're seeing the May 14 budget is very much as a recovery budget. It'll be one where we make sure that our public services can remain strong, and particularly in the health sector, where we need to ensure that our response there is as robust as it possibly can be. And we'll begin looking at different sectors of the economy for the kind of recovery packages that they need. When it comes to stimulus, I think timing is everything. And clearly, while there are significant restrictions on the New Zealand economy, while there is a need to continue to support households and businesses to get through, we need to be thinking about when stimulus would have its best effect, and when consumers particularly perhaps are feeling quite gun-shy and restricted in what they can actually do and buy, that's probably not the best time. So we'll continue to look at our options for that, but obviously a budget that's in a couple of weeks' time needs to be focused for the main part on our recovery and our immediate response.
Minister, government debt to GDP was under 20% pre-crisis levels. What's the appetite, I'm wondering, to push that up? Could it go to as much as, say, 50%?
Well, this is one of the things that New Zealand is well positioned in terms of this recovery. That debt to GDP ratio of just under 20% is very low relative to the rest of the world, and so it does place us in a position where we can borrow more and extend that out, and we will, and we are. The exact level that we reach will be one that will become clear when we get to that budget on the 14th of May. But it will continue to be, I would imagine, at the very low end of international comparisons on this. New Zealand is a robust economy, and we can service debt somewhat higher than where we've had it. One of the reasons we've kept it low is because we have tended to be susceptible to the impacts of global economic shocks and also natural disasters, which we've been unfortunate to have several of in New Zealand. So, as we say here in New Zealand, this is, we do this so we're ready for a rainy day, and it's pouring outside, and so we are now in a position to be able to use that debt position. We'll continue to be careful with our spending, but as most countries around the world have done, we've put in substantial support packages already, and there will be more to come.
We've crunched the numbers here at Bloomberg, and by our calculations, the RBNZ is on track to owning almost 30% of New Zealand's debt by February next year. I'm wondering whether debt monetisation is really an inevitability at this stage. It's taboo. The governor seems to be open at least to talking about it. But what are your positions on that? And I guess what are your assumptions as to what that means for government spending, what it means for inflation, Kiwi asset prices?
Yeah, look, I think, at the moment, the bond markets are continuing to function and operate well in New Zealand. And clearly the Reserve Bank is involved in the secondary market, and that is continuing to operate. Liquidity levels are good within the banking sector, and so for now, the approach that we're taking, I believe, is correct and right. Obviously, around the world, we're seeing the more direct involvement of central banks in bond purchasing, and that's obviously suitable for those countries at that particular time. What's absolutely clear is what everybody used to call unconventional monetary policy is now front and centre of the monetary policy of most countries, and so therefore it's a dangerous game to never say never on approaches. But we're comfortable with where we are in terms of that. Where it then leads in terms of inflation and overall asset prices, it's a brave person to try and predict that at this time. From my perspective, we have a good working relationship with our central bank. They are still independent in the decisions that they make, but clearly monetary and fiscal policy need to be aligned, and we're talking just about every day, and they've undertaken a number of initiatives to continue to bolster financial markets here, but also ensure that there's plenty of liquidity in the system, and for now that is working.
Minister, what could the size of the extra government support be? Because your Treasury has released scenarios from 20 billion Kiwi dollars to 40 billion. So could we safely assume that it would be at least 20 billion?
Well, look, those were just scenarios that the Treasury developed as indicative examples of what could happen. The final details of that will be in our budget. As I said before, we're in a strong position going into this in terms of New Zealand's debt levels. It means that we are able to facilitate the kind of fiscal policy that's needed and the fiscal responses that are needed. So we'll make sure that they are targeted towards the sectors that need our assistance, that they continue to support businesses and households to respond, and the amounts of money are eye-watering compared to what countries like ourselves are used to spending, but we are committed to, supporting our firms and our people through this situation. So the sums of money will be substantial, but the final details of that will be put out in 3 weeks' time.